Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are jumping into sourdough starters.
Yes.
And it's a topic that feels like it's surrounded by all these really rigid rules and honestly a lot of fear.
Oh, a huge amount of fear. People treat it like a fragile chemical formula that you have to follow exactly.
Right. Like if your kitchen is a degree too cold or you're an hour late with a feeding, you've ruined everything.
Exactly. And the source material we're looking at today from Henry Hunter's work is all about flipping that idea on its head.
What's the mission then?
The mission is to build confidence. It's about shifting from following a rigid recipe to really understanding a living system.
That's the mindset shift right there. Because the sources are really clear on this point. The calendar doesn't matter.
Not at all. Timelines are just, suggestions, guesses, really.
The only things that actually matter are performance and observation.
That's it. If you can learn to see what's happening in the jar, the whole thing stops being mysterious and it actually becomes predictable.
Okay, so let's unpack that. This living system idea, most of us just see flour and water.
Right.
But inside that jar, there are these two essential forces at play. They're competing, but they also need each other.
It's a really delicate ecosystem. First, you've got your wild yeast.
Okay, that's the one we all know.
That's the engine. It's the force that produces the carbon dioxide gas.
The lift, the bubbles that make the bread rise.
Exactly. That's the easy one to spot. But then you have the second force.
The bacteria.
The lactic acid bacteria.
Yeah.
Or LA for short. And these are the flavor shapers. They're the ones producing the acids that give you that classic sourdough tang.
The clean, sometimes almost fruity flavor.
Yes. They build the flavor, but they also build the resilience of the whole system.
So if these two are in this constant dance, how does it work? I mean, when I feed my starter, who gets the upper hand?
Well, they both get going on the simple sugars in the flour, but they thrive under slightly different conditions.
And that's where we come in.
That's the core principle from Hunter. Every single choice you make, the temperature of the room, how long you wait between feedings, the flour you use, it all actively shifts that balance between yeast and bacteria.
So you stop being a servant to the recipe and you start managing the ecosystem.
Precisely. You're in control.
And on that note, starting out, the sources are pretty specific about the initial setup. Whole grain flour.
Yes, absolutely. Whole wheat or rye is best because the bran has a much higher concentration of those wild yeasts and bacteria right from the start.
So you're giving it a head start.
You are. You mix it with water to a thick paste.
Yeah.
And using a scale here is really important. And then you just keep it warm, ideally around 70, maybe 75 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay, now we have to talk about the part where I think 90% of new bakers just give up.
The false rise.
The dreaded false rise. Day 2 or 3, the starter just explodes, it doubles, it looks amazing.
And then, crickets. It collapses and goes completely quiet for days.
And you think, I killed it, it's over.
Nope.
What is actually happening there?
That big dramatic rise is not your yeast. It's not a sign of mature strength. It's a temporary bacterial bloom.
A bacterial bloom, okay.
Think of it like this. All the different microbes in the flour wake up at once. The less robust ones eat the easy sugars really fast, and they create a big burst of gas.
So it's like a flash in the pan, a population boom that can't last.
Exactly. And the collapse, that quiet period that follows, that's actually the sign of success.
How is that success? It feels like failure.
Because that initial burst created acidity, and that acid changes the environment, making it too harsh for all those weak temporary microbes.
Ah, so it's clearing the way.
It's clearing the way for the stronger, more robust yeast strains that we actually want for the long haul. So you haven't failed. The environment is successfully maturing.
That reframes the entire process. So if we're not watching the calendar, we have to start watching the starter.
You have to learn its language.
So what are the key signals, the sensory cues that tell us it's really healthy and not just having a false start?
Let's start with smell. It's clear progression. At first, it just smells like wet flour.
Right, pasty.
Then, as the LB gets active, it can get pretty funky. Sour milk, sometimes acetone or nail polish remover.
A lot of people panic there too.
They do. But a truly mature, healthy starter pushes past that. It ends up smelling clean, tangy, and even a little sweet, like good yogurt with a hint of bread.
That shift from harsh acetone to clean tang, that's a huge indicator. What about the texture?
Well, right after you feed it, it's a thick paste. But as it ferments, it gets light, stretchy, almost like a mousse.
Aerated.
Highly aerated. But the biggest visual cue is the peak. A ready starter will rise and form this beautiful domed surface that shows it's trapping gas really well, and you'll see bubbles all the way down the side of the jar, not just on top.
So it's not just one big rise, it's about reliable, consistent behavior. That's the goal.
Predictability is the goal. Knowing it's going to double in, say, 4 to 6 hours at room temperature every single time, that's when you know it's ready.
Let's talk about discarding. This feels so wasteful to new bakers. You see people on social media just throwing away half their starter.
It seems so counterintuitive.
It does, but the source material reframes this completely. It's not waste, it's control.
It is pure management. Discarding is your lever for controlling two things, accumulated acid and total volume.
Okay, break that down.
If you never discarded, the acid would just build up and up until it literally poisons the yeast. Their activity would slow to a crawl. By discarding, you're reducing that acid load and basically resetting the microbial ratio.
Okay, that makes sense. But here's the question I always had. If the goal is just to feed the yeast, why can't I just keep adding fresh flour and water? I'd save flour, I'd have a huge starter. What's the downside of not discarding?
The problem is efficiency. You end up with this massive volume of starter that's super acidic. So when you add your fresh flour, it's like a drop in the ocean.
It gets diluted immediately.
It's diluted by too many microbes and way too much acid. You end up spending way more flour and time just to maintain a weak, sluggish culture. A strong starter is balanced and predictable. It doesn't have to be large.
So Hunter's recommendation is to maintain just what you need.
Just what you need, and keep the ratios right. That classic 1.1 part starter, 1 part flour, 1 part water that ensures the yeast have a clean slate and plenty of food.
Okay, perfect. Now for the fun part, controlling flavor. I always thought sourness was just random.
Not at all. This is where you really become the master of your bread. The main lever you have is temperature.
Temperature and time, right?
Temperature and fermentation time, because those two things favor one microbe over the other.
Okay, so how does that work in practice? Let's say I want a really tangy sour loaf.
Then you want to favor the lactic acid bacteria. You use warmer temperatures, say around 78 degrees Fahrenheit, and you'd allow for longer fermentation times between feedings.
Warm and slow.
Warm and slow boosts the production of acetic acid, which is that sharper, more vinegary tang that people think of as sour.
Okay, but what if I want the opposite? A milder, almost sweeter sourdough.
Then you reverse it. You want to favor the yeast. You keep things cooler, maybe around 68 degrees, and you use faster feeding cycles.
Feeding more often.
Yeah, maybe every 12 hours instead of every 24. The yeast thrive in the cooler temps, and by feeding it more often, you're just not giving the bacteria enough time to produce high levels of that sharp acid.
That's an incredible level of control. The sources have a great example of this.
They do.
A baker who keeps their starter at 78 degrees and feeds it once a day will make a loaf that tastes radically different, so much more sour, than someone who has the exact same starter but keeps it at 68 and feeds it twice a day.
Worlds apart. It completely dictates the final product. Flavor is not an accident. It's a choice you make with your environment.
Okay, so let's get to the final checklist. Identifying readiness. We know it's not about being 7 days old. It's about performance.
Purely performance.
What are the final metrics?
3 things. First, it has to double reliably in that 4 to 6 hour window after feeding.
Consistently.
Every time. Second, the surface at its peak has to be domed. That shows good gas retention. And third, you need to see bubbles throughout the jar, not just on top. That shows it's active all the way through.
And when you go to bake, do you wait for it to collapse again?
No, absolutely not. You want to use that energy. You use the starter right at or just before its peak, 4 to 6 hours after feeding.
Why not after?
Because a starter that has already collapsed is running out of food and energy. It'll make your final dough sluggish. You want it at maximum strength.
Now for what might be the biggest anxiety reducer of all, resilience.
They are so tough.
New bakers panic about everything. A missed feeding, a cold kitchen.
Unless you see visible, fuzzy mold, blue or green mold, your starter is almost certainly alive. A cold snap, a missed feeding. These are just signals. It's hungry or it's slowing down. It's not a disaster.
Let's talk about hooch, that dark grayish liquid that forms on top.
Yeah, that looks apocalyptic to a beginner.
But it's not.
Not at all. Hooch is just the byproduct, mostly alcohol that the yeast produce when they've run out of food. It's a sign of hunger and acid buildup, that's all.
I see a lot of advice online that just says stir it in, but the Hunter blueprint is a bit more nuanced.
It is. It depends on your goal.
Pour or stir.
If you stir it back in, you're reintroducing that alcohol and acid, which will slow the yeast down a bit. If you're trying to quickly revive a really neglected, sluggish starter.
You want to give it the best possible start.
Right. So pouring the hooch off first gives the fresh flour and water a much cleaner, faster environment to work in. If the hooch is really dark or black, I would always pour it off.
That's a great practical tip. So for most neglected starters, you can bring them back just by resuming that daily 1.1.1 feeding.
Absolutely. A few days of consistent feeding is the cure for almost any neglect.
And since this is a relationship, the care schedule has to fit the baker's life.
It does.
So for a daily baker,
keep it on the counter. Feed it once a day. 1.1.1 ratio. It'll always be ready to go.
And for the weekend warriors, baking once or twice a week.
The fridge is your best friend. Cold storage slows everything way down. You feed it maybe once a week to keep it healthy.
But there's a critical step there, right? You can't just use it straight from the coal.
No, you have to plan ahead. Take it out, let it warm up for a few hours, give it a feed, and then wait for it to hit that reliable 4 to 6 hour peak before you mix your dough.
And for the very infrequent seasonal baker,
long-term storage. You can dehydrate it into flakes or even freeze a portion.
But reviving it isn't instant.
No, that's a commitment. You'll need to plan for 5 to 7 days of daily feeding to get it back to full strength. And a pro tip, always keep a small, dried backup of your starter in a jar somewhere safe, just in case of disaster.
The ultimate insurance policy. So to bring it all back to where we started, the main takeaway is that you're not following a recipe.
You're managing a relationship, a living thing.
And observation is the only tool you really need.
Stop watching the clock. Start listening to the signals your starter is sending you. If you can describe its smell, its texture, how fast it rises, you're doing it right.
Fantastic. So we've covered the biology, the troubleshooting, the long-term care. Let's end with a final thought for you to take away.
Okay.
We know that temperature and timing are your primary dials for controlling sourness. So consider this. If two people started with the exact same flour, the exact same water, a clone of the same starter culture,
Genetically identical.
how drastically different could their bread taste if one baker kept their starter cool, around 68 degrees, with frequent feedings, and the other kept theirs consistently warm, say 78 degrees, with much longer fermentation times?
The flavors would be on opposite ends of the spectrum. One mild and creamy, the other intensely tangy and complex. It just proves that the signature flavor of your sourdough isn't really in the flour. It's in the environment you create. You are the architect of your own flavor profile.
That's the real power you get when you stop following the recipe and start managing the relationship. Think about that. We'll catch you next time for The Deep Dive.